welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. I'm Perryn Keys. I'm joined today by Wilson Alexander, our lead LSU football beat reporter, and by the venerable one, the longtime one, Edward Scott Rabalais, our longtime columnist. They are here to discuss many things LSU football related. There are many things to be had on the table. We've got the transfer portal to discuss. We've obviously got Jayden Daniels' pursuit of the Heisman and his preparation to head to New York, as will these two gentlemen here shortly. And we've got some potential changes on the coaching staff and maybe some potential changes elsewhere, but we don't know yet. But we will start with a bit of business as usual. If you're listening and tuning in, you already know that The Advocate is the #1 destination for LSU football coverage. This podcast is just another great way for us to bring this coverage to you. Subscribe to The Advocate, please. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe and get a hold of our newsletter, whether it's LSU football, men's basketball, women's basketball, gymnastics, baseball, the whole works. You get all the headlines and all the latest news delivered straight to your inbox. To do that, you sign up at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are coming to you live here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers at NOLA.com. Subscribe there. Even if you don't catch us live, you can catch us anytime. Our videos will be posted there for you, available for you at any time at your leisure. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. You can find us there. And finally, LSU championship posters are a great holiday gift for the LSU fan in your life. These things are iconic, as we say. LSU has won plenty over the past 15 to 20 to 30 years. Baseball and trips to the Final Four, championships with women's basketball, baseball again, football, the whole works. You can get those championship posters at store.theadvocate.com. Again, that's store.theadvocate.com. Enter the coupon code INSIDER for 15% off your purchase, and you can get that knocked out before the holidays. We are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies, to learn more, you go to championwealthstrategies.com. It's a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL Financial Member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. Contact Champion Wealth Strategies and plan like a champion today. We will actually hear from Brandon Worley from Champion Wealth Strategies a little bit later on. He's got leave it to a financial guy to provide some numbers and insight on Jayden Daniels' pursuit of the Heisman and where all that stands now here, just a couple of days from the big ceremony in New York. But first, why don't we discuss some potential changes coming for LSU? We don't know necessarily yet what those changes will be, if there will be any changes. You two gentlemen on, what was that, Tuesday morning. On Tuesday, you met with Brian Kelly among many other members of the media, and he didn't say changes weren't coming, but he didn't not say changes weren't coming. And so, Wilson, I'll just sort of, I will throw that to you and just, provide whatever insight you may have learned from that, in addition to some news about the offensive staff as well that's come down since then.
Certainly. So, Brian Kelly, he did a good job of basically giving very passionate answers. There it is. About, how much this means to him to get this right, and how seriously he takes these decisions, without really giving any insight into where his mind is at. Look, talking to sources, there are still certainly staff changes that are expected to happen. It's just a matter of which ones they're going to be. Brian Kelly, this ultimately comes down to him and his call. And while there are certainly people in the know and who understand maybe his thinking, this is going to be it's going to be his decision and what he wants to do. And also on his timeline, which I think is another key thing to keep in mind. And he kind of gave some insight into that timeline, although he's been sort of moving the goalposts around. Because last Monday he said that his evaluations would take place, this was on the Paul Feinbaum show, over the next week to 10 days. And then when we talked to him on Tuesday, he said, oh, those haven't happened yet. We're still a week away from that. And that it was a matter of last week doing player exit interviews, this week getting back on the road recruiting. He said that these coaches, it was kind of interesting phrasing, actually. They still have responsibilities to LSU. It was sort of interesting just saying it in that regard, I thought. But that's maybe just reading too much into things. And that those evaluations would be done once they were, the dead period hits December 16th and then signing day. And so it sounds like maybe they're trying to get through that before any changes are made. And so we'll kind of see, what he ends up deciding to do because, like I said, they're trying to get through, it seems like, a few things first. And although I don't believe that evaluations haven't been ongoing throughout the season, he's certainly forming opinions. According to him, he still has to kind of really sit down and take a 30,000-foot view of the situation.
So, look, let's just, the elephant in the room, of course, is Matt House. We don't yet know, based on what Brian Kelly has said about Matt House. I suppose before we get to Mike Denbrock, because there's news about Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator. Before we get to that, Rab, I'll just put it to you. We've sort of danced around this topic and discussed it a lot. I'll put you in the hot seat. If you were Brian Kelly, would you make a change? Would you make a change with not just your defensive staff, but your defensive coordinator?
He spoke Tuesday about making a change in midseason back in 2016 at Notre Dame when he fired Brian Van Gorder, who he said was in his wedding.
Yes.
Yeah, they're longtime friends.
Right.
And after 4 games that season, he fired him.
I don't know if Brian calls Brian Kelly and Pocky and wishes him a happy anniversary now, but it's a business. He was trying to say it's a business. And then last year, as we've talked about before, they were in similar straits with their special teams.
Yeah.
With Brian Polian, who he was also close to, but he didn't make a move there till after the season, kicking him to an upstairs administrative position, and then Brian Polian left to be AD at John Carroll University. So. It's interesting to try to read the Brian Kelly mindset, where he is with all this. They just gave Matt House a contract extension last year, which at the time you go, well, they weren't great, but I can kind of see it. He wants to keep him around. You kind of feel, could he go back to the NFL? It all comes down to, does Brian Kelly believe that their defensive philosophy, that his coaching ability is going to help them win a championship? Because he knows that LSU can't continue to play defense like this and be the kind of program he came to LSU to fashion, which is a national championship contender. They're not, and they're certainly not there at all. And this year brings that even into sharper relief that you have such a brilliant offense with an average defense. Maybe they go 11-1 or something like that. And they're in the hunt. So.
You still haven't answered my question.
I still haven't answered my question because
you, like Brian Kelly, have not answered the question.
I'm thinking he's been very evasive.
Yeah, I've learned from the feet of the master. I think there will be changes, but for the fact that he got an extension and he hasn't done anything yet, and he, I think he's going to keep him. I think he's going to keep him.
I'm still going to nail you to the wall because that's not what I asked.
Should he?
Yeah, that's right.
Should he? No.
Now, I'll give Rab some relief here. I know you don't like trying to call for someone's job or anything like that.
I don't, but
I'm really not asking you whether you're calling for his job. I'm just saying, if you were Brian Kelly,
if I was Brian Kelly,
yeah,
no, I would say we were. If I'm Brian Kelly, I'm thinking LSU. We were an average defense last year and a really lousy defense this year, and I get the impression Kelly thinks it's somewhat the personnel that they have to get better players in there, and they do, but that's part of it as well. Matt House is not known as a crackerjack recruiter either, kind of like Dave Aranda, back when he was here coaching under Miles and Orgeron, and certainly not someone like let's use we could say Frank Wilson, but Joe Sloan is considered to be a good coordinator on the offensive side. So no, I would move on. I would move on, but it's more politically difficult to do that, to go to the board of supervisors and say we got to pay this guy off,
right? Than
it would be if you hadn't given a thing, and you're going to maybe get some pushback or some static. I would expect that Not that stops LSU from doing anything they
It
want
would
to
be
do
about $5 or $6
athletically.
million, I think.
Yeah, so I would not be one to have to make that request.
I will say Scott Woodward has never, how many times have you guys heard him, use the term human capital? We're going to invest a lot in human capital. He has rarely struck me as the type of person who says, well, we really need to save $1 here. He's more or less got the backing, he more or less will back his coaches, if his coaches say, hey, look, I need to make a change here and it's going to cost a little bit of money.
One other thing, just real quick, if I could, in regards to any potential timeline, I think we mentioned this last week that Scott Woodward in particular is always meticulous with his hires. And Brian Kelly has been that way as well with, this is a very small sample size, so we're still kind of learning how Kelly does things, and every situation is different. Like he said, in 2016, he fired Brian Van Gorder after 4 games. But in last year with Brian Polian, that move wasn't made until February.
That's right.
It was Mardi Gras.
Right.
It was in the middle of Mardi Gras that they did that. It might have been Mardi Gras Day, that they did that morning, that it kind of suddenly, was finalized and all that got done. And so, I would not expect it to take that long because this is a defensive coordinator. It's a little bit different. There's a lot more that's going on. But this could be something that gets stretched out.
So, and listen, by the way, no decision has been made to our knowledge on Matt House or anybody else for that matter. But, again, I sort of nailed you to the wall and said, hey, would you, if you were Brian Kelly, would you do this? You still, I know, but very few people want to hear this right now, but you still could make a passionate counter argument to say, no, it's worth it to keep him for one more year based on the things that you said, personnel and, whatever other limitations, poor Greg Brooks, the defensive line coach, Jimmy Lindsey, all these types of things really, it was sort of a perfect storm that hit the LSU defense this year and made them very, very, very subpar.
Oh, and all the things duly noted, and I've chronicled a lot of them. It's still not an excuse to be ranked 100 and something in the country.
No, 104th in total defense.
Yeah,
119th on third down, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was. Listen, we all saw it. And everybody who's tuned into this podcast probably saw it as well.
Also, LSU was allowed 27.8 points per game, which is 80th, which isn't great, but thought it might be more. Well, it is more against Power 5 teams.
I was just 34.
It's like
and
34.3 against Power 5 teams.
Yeah. So, as we await news on that matter, one way or the other, we do have news on the offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock. Wilson, if you just sort of fill us in on what happened Wednesday morning.
Yeah, so this is actually the day after the day after Mike Denbrock was in Arkansas for the Broyles Awards ceremony. He was a finalist for that. Arkansas defensive coordinator Phil Parker won that award. He was what's that?
Iowa.
Thank you. What did I say?
Arkansas.
Oh, right. He was in Arkansas.
Sorry.
Thank you. LSU is finalizing a 3-year extension. Football Scoop reported that Texas A&M pursued Mike Denbrock to be its offensive coordinator under Mike Elko and was going to try to make him the highest paid offensive coordinator in the country. Currently, the highest paid offensive coordinators in the country are Clemson's Garrett Riley and Washington's Ryan Grubb at about $2 million, just over that. And so that's kind of gives you a ballpark of maybe what Texas A&M was offering. We don't know the financial figures yet on what LSU is doing with this new extension. Mike Denbrock was making $1.4 million this year. Next year, he was set to make $1.5. But after directing the top offense in the country, being an element of Jayden Daniels' development, being a finalist for the Broyles Award, and with Texas A&M coming after him, LSU gave him a 3-year extension, and so he will be the offensive coordinator here for the foreseeable future.
And I don't think anybody will put up a fight on that, whether he got an extension or not. I think everybody is certainly around here seems to be very satisfied with the LSU offense, as they should be.
Can I throw in one?
Yeah, sure.
Devil's advocate kind of thing. Do you think it makes Joe Sloan more likely to want to leave and be an offensive coordinator somewhere else? And he seemed like he's part of the development as well. And like I said, he's a good recruiter and everything. I don't think he's going to stay and be the quarterback's coach forever.
No, probably not forever, but I don't know. Joe's been in Louisiana now for a long time, and he's been working his way up. But it's kind of a matter, and I haven't had the chance to ask Joe about this, like what he wants. And I don't know. He does deserve quite a bit of credit with Jayden's development. I think in the immediate, thing is that LSU is probably also going to give him an extension and a raise, especially because right when this new staff came in, LSU gave so Brad Davis was the only coach who was retained.
Right.
And so he only had 2 years left on his deal. He got an extension last year, a 1-year extension. He'll probably get an extension too, or at least he could be in line for one, I should say, based on merit, because LSU was named a finalist for the Joe Moore Award. That offensive line is in a great position right now, and I get the sense Brad would like to stay. His family's in Baton Rouge, and he's from Baton Rouge, and so LSU he could be in line for one too. But anyway, that was a very circuitous way of saying. All of the other assistants were given 3-year contracts at the start of the Brian Kelly era. Next year is year 3. They're coming up on the last year of those deals. You usually don't let the contract get to the last year. So someone like Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton, Frank Wilson, you could be seeing a lot of contract extensions over the next few months here as LSU solidifies that staff, especially on the offensive side, which has been so productive and been very good recruiters. They could all be in line for extensions here in the offseason.
So as for personnel, we discussed obviously trying to fix the LSU defense. What do they need to do to fix the defense? Upgrade in personnel is certainly in order. Brian Kelly was pretty evasive on that as well, although he did say that LSU doesn't want to rely as much on the transfer portal moving forward as it did the first 2 years. I suppose, before we get into, potential targets and specific names, is that the right way to go? And, Wilson, is there sort of a balancing act? What's the right balancing act to find as far as you're concerned, and then, as far as Brian Kelly is concerned?
Well, this was certainly more revealing than any answer about defensive coaches. Brian Kelly, he threw out a number. He said that LSU thinks that 10 of the 11 players with the most defensive snaps this season are coming back. Now, I think he meant 10 of the 11 who are eligible to return, because 3 of the 11 aren't eligible to return. That's Andre Sam, Omar Spates, and Jordan Jefferson. But what it was speaking to, not so much the specific number, but that one, that's a good sign. I wanted to try to get the microphone back to ask him, okay, well, who's the one who isn't? Who else is coming back? But the LSU, like we said last week, was spent a lot of time doing player exit interviews. And while these things could change a lot, players could enter the portal, they could make different decisions. If they're in a position right now to think that most of this defense who is draft eligible is coming back, that is a big accomplishment, because Kelly's priority was player retention. Because they're trying to get to a point where they're not over-reliant on the transfer portal. You asked if they should. They should not be reliant on the transfer portal every year. It's not a sustainable way to live. As we saw this season, you had to go back and get a whole new crop of cornerbacks, and it didn't pan out the way that it needed to for this team to be successful. And so they still certainly need to go and be able to get guys who are instant impact players at some certain positions. But instead of just getting numbers to restock a roster that, as we all remember, at the Texas Bowl had 39 healthy scholarship players, there was actually more on the roster at the time, but not everybody was healthy.
Right.
Yeah, like they had to rebuild, and it was going to take a few years. They were pretty close to that 85-man limit now. And most teams aren't resting right at 85 because of transfer portal and guys leaving in and out. But LSU was sitting around 79 this year, I think. And so now that they're back up with those just pure numbers, you can start to really target very specific areas. Like at cornerback, you've got numbers now. You've got the bodies to refill that room.
But yes,
because last year they went in and they got a bunch of guys. Even if Deuce Chestnut and Denver Harris are no longer part of the team next year, depending on what happens with their situations, like you still got guys.
We assume J.K. Johnson will be back in uniform for the first time for LSU.
So you don't have to fully restock a room like that. You can maybe go and get someone like a Jair Brown from Ohio State who can compete for playing time and maybe add to that room without overhauling that room, which is important.
In addition to Jair Brown, there are some sort of potential targets. We discussed this, and you did a great job on Monday of breaking this down, that certainly we've seen in the first 2 years under Brian Kelly that LSU has sort of found a good niche in terms of bringing back Louisiana players via the transfer portal. That's certainly not the only types of players they've gotten in the transfer portal, but there are 3 other players in addition to Jair Brown who are that would make a lot of sense in terms of fit, in terms of certainly familiarity with Louisiana. 2 wide receivers and a safety, and I'll just sort of let you break that down for us, if you would.
Absolutely. So, like we said, the portal opened on Monday, and since then, Jayden Gilbert is a safety from Texas A&M. He played high school football at U-High. He would make a ton of sense. He was a 10-game starter in 2022 for Texas A&M, and we know LSU needs a safety. Regardless of what Major Burns does, LSU needs a safety, one with experience, especially starting experience at the SEC level. And he would be able to come in and play right away. And that would probably be, based on who we've seen enter the portal thus far, who we know has a Louisiana tie already, that would probably even be like my top priority, getting him. And then, like you said, the 2 receivers are Will Shepherd and Xavier Thomas from Mississippi State, who entered on Tuesday night. And Xavier would certainly address, I think, most immediately the issues at punt returner. Greg Clayton, honestly, props to Greg Clayton. Applause for Greg Clayton.
Absolutely.
You go, Greg Clayton, for just being reliable and catching the
stabilizing
ball.
that position.
Just
Yes.
catching the ball, and so it wasn't a constant problem this year. But LSU needs a difference maker there. Aaron Anderson wasn't this season. Maybe he can be in the future. But Xavier Thomas has already proven that he can be, and so that would be one. He's from Louisiana, and then Will Shepherd is from Mandeville, and Shepherd is somebody who could maybe be that veteran receiver to bring into a room that's got a lot of young guys who haven't really proven it at the SEC level yet. Tons of talent. Shelton Sampson's got a ton of talent, but he barely played this year.
That's right.
And so Will Shepherd has played a lot in the SEC. That would be a top target as well. He's going to have a lot of suitors, but LSU may have an edge on that if they do decide to give him an offer. We don't know yet if they have extended an offer to him because of the experience that he has at the SEC level.
Rab, you know far better than probably anybody in this room that the pull of home, the pull of Louisiana, is a real thing. You may remember that Ed Ogeron in particular, but also Les Miles too, placed a premium on. I'm thinking specifically about Katrina kids whose families had no other choice but to leave Louisiana based on circumstances. And Ed and Les both, and their staffs both, said, hey, look, if this kid's got a tie to Louisiana, that's an easy sell. We need to stay on him. Doesn't matter if he's in Dallas or Atlanta or Tampa or wherever folks wound up. Whether it was Katrina or not, we know very well that plenty of Louisiana families leave for Houston and Dallas and Atlanta and places like that, or elsewhere, Los Angeles even, places like that. There is something to be said for that, and I just think it's interesting. Not only do you have players who are within the state, but sort of these kind of Louisiana legacy type players who maybe never actually lived in the state, but have some sort of connection there, familial connection. You've seen this for a long time. You've covered this team for a long time. How much of an advantage is it that LSU happens to be in a state that happens to have so much talent, sort of homegrown talent, and then sort of homegrown adjacent talent, if that makes any sense?
That's a big advantage, considering this is a small state that produces an outsized number of football players and can export them.
Yeah,
is what you're saying in a sense, and with the hope that you might get them to come back one day because there's a tie, and it helps, and it seems to help more in football than other sports. You get a player like Paul Skeens or something like that. He ties here. This is a good place to come play. But in football, it seems to matter a little more. That it's that there's I've got family there. I've got my grandparents there. I've got a significant number of other family members there, and that helps. You're probably just about tapped out that vein of Katrina family.
The Katrina phase and it's only going to get weaker and weaker as the generations go on.
Right. But obviously, there's a lot of people who move to adjacent states, and LSU can. They've gone. They kind of go through phases. They go national, and then they kind of focus more on the region. But generally speaking, it makes the most sense to focus on the region, East Texas, around to the Florida Panhandle, maybe a little bit into Georgia, certainly Mississippi and Alabama, obviously, and so that's a good place to go, and it's the best for the long-term health of the program to try to get those players because, transfers are great and they're guys with experience, but a lot of times they're guys with baggage too. We certainly saw that this year, didn't we? With Denver Harris, who's someone who could really help the team, and he just, he's still not totally gone, right? Am I saying that correctly? But
yeah, he's, as Brian Kelly has said, he's on scholarship,
right.
But he has not practiced. He's not been with the team for quite a bit. Same thing with Juice Chestnut.
Right, and so it's like there's a reason why maybe they're on the transfer market. Sometimes it's not. Jayden Daniels is one. That you say there was no baggage there, but sometimes there is, and you don't want to have to depend on that time and time again. I'm saying that, but I continue to say they need to go to one of the positions of need in the transfer portal is a good veteran quarterback from somewhere. I don't know who it should be, but it should be a veteran quarterback.
That's timely to bring up that topic. That'll be our next topic. This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our Raiders' great work. It's at theadvocate.com. Please subscribe to The Advocate, whether it's our print edition, our digital edition. You go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Stay up to date with everything with our LSU newsletter. It's a daily newsletter. Rav handles that 3 times a week, but it's a daily newsletter. To get that newsletter straight to your inbox, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday. We are here live on all our social channels, specifically the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. We're there live, but you can catch us later on in that same channel if you don't catch us live. We're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Easy for me to say. And of course, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Plan like a champion today at championwealthstrategies.com. So you did mention the transfer portal and the potential for finding a quarterback at the transfer portal. Next year, LSU is slated to have, obviously, Nussmeier, Ricky Collins, and Colin Hurley. Those are the 3 quarterbacks scheduled to be on scholarship here next year at LSU. Brian Kelly, in talking to you guys on Tuesday, he didn't say that LSU wouldn't necessarily go sniffing around for a quarterback in the transfer portal, which is not necessarily a terrible idea, just given the notion that Collins and Hurley. Collins is, what is he, thrown 2 passes as a freshman this year? And so he's certainly very green, and Hurley will be very, very, very green entering next year, having reclassified to join the team this coming season. So where do you think this stands? Rab, you've been fairly outspoken, actually, about LSU's need to bring in another quarterback via the transfer portal. Where does that stand? And then we'll turn it over to Wilson.
Well, Nussmeier can be the guy, and he can be the guy. And certainly they've sold him on the fact that he would be the heir apparent to Jayden Daniels when we found out that Jayden was coming back for this year, which wasn't exactly the game plan, I think, when he first arrived from Arizona State. But it doesn't mean that you can't have competition. And what you're left with, you're going from this, what we said all year was a great situation for LSU in terms of, a veteran quarterback and a fairly experienced, talented backup in Nussmeier, who's had to go in a couple of times. But next year, you'd be left with, let's just say you just go with the guys that you mentioned. You're one, ankle injury away to Garrett Nussmeier, and God forbid, of having Ricky Collins out there. I don't think he's going to play much in the bowl game, unless they get this enormous lead like they did against Purdue. You can't count on that. He's not going to gain a vast amount of experience in the bowl game or even in the bowl practices going in. So you need someone who else can carry the load, because the expectation will be there for LSU, like a lot of teams in the SEC, to make a 12-team playoff every year. And so you can't just leave it to chance that much. They need at least a veteran quarterback. And I'm trying to think, he's not a player. Will Rogers, something like that. That's not a guy, but
I'll posit my theory, which is like maybe there's some guy who's been kicking a certain body part and taking names for 3 years at an FCS school,
right? And
maybe wants a shot. That's a sort of a little bit more dependable, reliable, proven backup Now, look, maybe they may go shoot the moon in a very similar way to how they handled the quarterback position when it appeared that Miles Brennan was going to be the heir apparent, and they brought in Jayden Daniels anyway. And, that certainly turned out well for LSU. Wilson, anything you want to add to that?
A few different things. So you got to keep in mind when LSU, what they might go after in terms of a quarterback. Like you said, Brian Kelly didn't say yes. He also did not say no. Right. A top tier quarterback on the market, if you look at a name like Kyle McCord, or DJU or Cameron Ward, people like this, who was Dylan Gabriel, who have started games at a high level, it's going to cost you money, NIL money.
And they're going to want to come knowing they're going to be a starter.
It's going to be 7 figures. Just recently, the Nebraska coach.
Matt Rule.
Thank you. Matt Rule said that it was basically $1 to $2 million for a top transfer portal quarterback. And what LSU? I don't think LSU would want to spend that on somebody, especially because of the situation with Garrett. If you didn't have Garrett here and you had like nobody who had ever really played much at all, then maybe you do go after one of those guys. You probably go after one of those guys because you need it. But this with Garrett there, I don't think that's what you go after. And LSU also hasn't been. It hasn't really been their NIL strategy to go after and throw a ton of money at somebody in the transfer portal like that, from what I understand. And so, I think it would be more so, like you're saying, somebody who maybe has, like even Will Rogers. I think that Will Rogers is probably going to go somewhere and want to play, right away and have kind of a guarantee. And maybe you could sell him on the fact of, you can come here and compete. LSU has never really told anybody like, hey, you're guaranteed a spot, especially a quarterback. Like when Jayden came in, he was never guaranteed a spot. He had to go out and win it, and he did. And then they would do the same sort of thing. And so, but maybe you would be able to sell somebody on that. But with that, you also, you run the risk of losing Nussmeier and being up in the same exact position that you're trying to avoid, which is not having to go to Ricky Collins before he's ready. And this is also not to bash Ricky Collins in any way.
Not at all.
Someday he might be a very good quarterback. It's just that, like we were saying, he's a freshman who's barely played, and that's not what you want to hinge your championship hopes on, because you got a whole team to think about. And so, like a name like this, 24/7 Sports reported this on Monday that NC State quarterback MJ Morris said that LSU had been one of the first teams to contact him. MJ Morris played in 4 games this year. He completed 55.8% of his passes for 719 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. NC State, largely because of its defense this year, went 3-1 in those games. They beat Clemson. They lost to Duke, though, 24-3. So I throw out that name. What do you think of that name? Somebody like that who's played a little bit. He's a sophomore, so he's got a few years of experience. I feel like if they were to go after somebody, it would be like in that vein, where you're looking for a little bit more of maybe a backup, but again, at the same time, somebody who can push Nussmeier in practice, because competition can bring the best out of you. It's helped bring the best out of Jayden having Garrett around with him. What do you think of somebody like that?
Yeah, because I think it's kind of a political situation here, as well as just a personnel or a philosophical situation that you've gotten Garrett to agree to come back once, and he's admitted he thought about leaving, but they convinced him somehow to come back and wait your turn, and I'm going way back, a la Matt Flynn way back in the day. In 2006, he was Jamarcus Russell's backup. Then he's the guy in 2007, and they won the national championship. I don't quite feel we haven't seen as much of Garrett Nussmeier as we did. Matt Flynn was the MVP of the Peach Bowl in 2005, coming in and just played great against Miami. We haven't seen quite as much of Nussmeier, so I don't feel quite as good about the situation as I think LSU felt about Matt Flynn replacing Russell in 2007. But you can't bring in somebody KJ Jefferson maybe or something like that. You can't bring in somebody so good as like, well, damn, I've got I've got a 50-50 chance of being here. I'm going to leave, and then you're back at square one basically with this other 1 year and a 1 year guy transferring in, and then Ricky Collins, an inexperienced player who again we're not knocking. So I think somebody good with as they say, good with a chance to be great. Not necessarily great coming in. It would probably be the best thing, but you have to bolster your depth at the quarterback position.
To me, and it's really just for a 1 year thing too, because potentially, I should say, like LSU is under Joe Sloan, who we talked about a minute ago. The quarterback recruiting has been pretty darn good, and the quarterback development has been very good.
And they're going after one really hot
quarterback. A month from now, January 6th, Bryce Underwood commits. This is the number one quarterback in the country in 2025. I think he's the number one player in America. Like, this is a guy who, if LSU can land him, that makes this 2025 class the kind of class that can like propel you to championships. And maybe 2024 can as well, but it's not ranked as highly as what LSU could potentially be assembling in that 2025 class, potentially in terms of skill players. I think they've got a very good shot. It seems like it's between them and Michigan. And a lot of the buzz is pointing toward LSU. We'll see. We've got a month left between now and then. And then LSU's got to hang on to him for the rest of that cycle too. So a long way to go before he is signed his NLI to LSU. But, if you can land him, then in particular, then you really just need it's tricky because you really just need somebody who's kind of in the gap, exactly.
To me, it's almost like an NFL team that thinks they're a Super Bowl contender, and they've got your clear Drew Brees or whoever, and you want that Mark Brunell. You want somebody who you feel like, well, okay, if our starting quarterback is out 4 to 6, we want somebody who's going to be able to sort of hold the fort. Maybe they don't win every single game, but certainly going to keep you in the hunt. And that to me actually more applies as we go down the road because hey, look, LSU is ranked 13th right now. In the latest college football playoff rankings, and so we know that next year, we'd put you on the cusp.
They're one play away from the Ole Miss game, from being in the national hunt in the playoff hunt.
So the 12-team playoff. The 12-team playoff was this year. Oh man, we already talked about whether or not this season was a disappointment or not. And it didn't come down to like that one Ole Miss game because Ole Miss would be in. They were in a New Year's Six game. Oh man, everybody would be livid.
Yeah. But just think how the dynamic has shifted for LSU with the quarterback position. You get a Joe Burrow to come in. Joe Burrow's thinking LSU or Cincinnati. The University of Cincinnati, not the Bengals. The University of Cincinnati at the time. And he kind of picks LSU like, I guess.
And they weren't sure they were going to get him either.
Right. No, not at all.
They were actually convinced that he was more likely to sign with Cincinnati than he was with LSU.
Stay close to home and all that stuff. And then, of course, this happens. Then now Jayden's come along. You appear likely to have 2 Heisman winners in a 4-year span. And now it's like, why wouldn't – now all of a sudden it's like when it used to be LSU's a quarterback desert. Now it's like, why wouldn't a Bryce Underwood wouldn't have come here? Look at compared to Michigan, which ran the ball the entire second half against Penn State. Why wouldn't you want to come here and play? So you just kind of got to hold the fort. This is a big important transition for LSU that can maybe take you to another level where it's like where you're starting to get quarterbacks come in here. Like Paul Skeens came in here in baseball or something like that. Well, of course they want to come here and play baseball. Now then you get to a position where of course a quarterback wants to come to LSU, and that's something we're not used to.
And Wilson, you'll have a story that you're working on this week later on at theadvocate.com about this very thing, about how the emergence and transcendence of Joe Burrow and Jayden Daniels has presumably forever changed the position of the quarterback at LSU.
At the very least, it's changed the expectation of what of an LSU quarterback, because before Burrow, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is sort of my perception of it. Really because there was some solid quarterbacks in the early 2000s, like Jamarcus Russell going number 1 overall, but really basically between what about Jordan Jefferson to Burrow or so maybe, or would it even be before that where it was like you said a QB does it? Where do you think it kind of started?
It started to get. Went bad, or
the quarterback position started to look really rough.
After after Matt Flynn left.
Okay.
After he waited his turn, finally get to play the one great year, and then they thought they were in good shape with. Actually, it was Ryan Perrylou getting kicked off the team is what put LSU in kind of in a perpetual bind, because then you played Jarrett Lee too early, and you throw all those pick sixes, and Lee and Jefferson go back together, and then they just couldn't find an established quarterback.
Well,
when it was supposed to be Ryan Perrylou after Matt Flynn.
And also when they had 5-star quarterbacks, the coaching staff that was in power at that time was so scared of a turnover that they really didn't turn that quarterback loose either.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
So starting with Perrylou, so that would be about 2008 until Burrow. It was always trying to get to that quarterback. So in terms of pure expectations of what an LSU quarterback is supposed to be, it's completely different now because that standard has now been set. That bar is there, and it's not only there. There's two of them that are right next to each other. And so now, if you're an LSU quarterback from now for a very long time, that's going to have a lasting effect. And of what you were supposed to be able to accomplish and what LSU wants out of its quarterback position. It always wanted that. Now it's seen that, and there's a difference there.
So, speaking of the quarterback position, the current quarterback at LSU is closing in on what we believe will be Heisman Trophy number 3 for LSU. Jayden Daniels, as we know, is the perceived front runner. He is at minus, depending on where you shop, he's at minus 1,400. Michael Penix of Washington is at plus 1,000. Bo Nix is at plus 1,200. We all, well, I don't want to speak for you guys. I think we all believe that Jayden Daniels is probably going to come home from New York with a Heisman Trophy in hand. But in the meantime, while we discuss this and while we break it all down, Brandon Worley from Champion Wealth Strategies, leave it to a financial guy and a numbers guy to come up with some numbers that sort of really illustrate, not only numbers that illustrate just how well Jayden Daniels has played this year, but also, financial people have to sort of have insight too. They have to have good predictive instincts as to what may happen. So anyway, we'll leave Brandon Worley in charge and let him take it away.
Hello, this is Brandon Worley with Champion Wealth Strategies, one of your sponsors for the Advocates LSU Sports Insider podcast. I've been tasked today to give you some reasons why I think Jayden Daniels ought to be your Heisman Trophy winner. You see, at Champion Wealth Strategies, we deal with money and we deal with numbers. A lot of this has to do with economics. But as you know, or should, economics is both an art and a science. So is picking a Heisman finalist. So let's take a look at some of the numbers, and then let's take a look at some of the things that aren't in the numbers that might lead someone to believe that Daniels needs to take this trophy home for the Tigers. Daniels is the only quarterback in the country to throw for over 3,000 yards and rush for over 1,000 yards in a season. Okay? In fact, he broke a record doing that against Florida as far as nobody's ever thrown that many passing yards and rushing yards in a game in FBS history. And that was against the Florida Gators, an SEC team. So there's that. Nix, he leads the country in completions and completion percentage. I think he's actually thrown for some more yards than Jayden Daniels has, but not by much. Jayden Daniels pretty much leads every other category. And when we talk about the third place guy, it looks like Penix. He's got some stats too, but they're not quite as good as Daniels on any level. But here's the issue. The problem with this whole argument doesn't really have to do with the numbers. It has to do with the fact that Jayden Daniels did this against SEC defense and dominated them. And I watched many of them in person. It looked like he was running past at will against SEC cornerbacks and safeties. Those are some of the fastest human beings in the country, as you should know that. Bo Nix couldn't handle it in the SEC. So he had to take his talents over to the Pacific Northwest so he could get any type of recognition. And he's probably going to be a clip holder when he gets to the NFL. Same thing with Michael Penix. I believe Jayden Daniels is the unicorn that these people have been looking for the last 40 years. No, I'm not talking about Steve Young. I'm not talking about Steve McNair. I'm not talking about Donovan McNabb. And I'm not talking about Lamar Jackson. This is the guy. He's going to be the guy. He ought to be number 1 pick in the NFL draft. And I think he should be, and I think he will. And if he's not, that just shows you how foolish these people are. Remember Ryan Leaf? That's Bo Nix. Anyway, thank you for listening to my 2 cents. And I appreciate your sponsorship with the Advocates LSU Sports Insider podcast. Keep watching and listening. Thank you.
That was Brandon Worley of Champion Wealth Strategies. Obviously, they've been with us for the entirety of this podcast. They help us bring this podcast to you every Monday and Thursday. We'll have to check back in to see whether Champion Wealth Strategies is going to move into the Heisman predicting business for this year and all the years beyond from here on out. So anyway, we will be here on Monday, obviously, to recap what will have happened at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. But Rab, I was going to ask you, what? Listen, the witching hour is almost here. LSU, we believe, is closing in on Heisman Trophy number 3. Jayden Daniels, we expect to bring it home. It's not sure. It's not going to be a landslide like it was in 2019 with Joe Burrow. But we'll see what happens. I'll just ask you. You not only have been a Heisman voter since 1997, you've actually been to the ceremony. Obviously, you were there in 19 when Burrow won. What can we expect? What are we going to see in terms of the actual trophy presentation, the entire show on Saturday up there in New York?
Yeah, first of all, the 4 finalists, Jayden, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and Marvin Harrison, they go on Friday. There's press conferences. They take them around town. They probably go to the Stock Exchange and a children's hospital, take a picture in Times Square. Then Saturday is the big show at a theater at the Lincoln Center, which is right off of Central Park. And, with former Heisman winners and everything, we're going to see, it's an hour-long show, but it really comes down to, and the winner is, the Heisman winner is, and then, there'll be a speech, and they're going to lift the winner gets to lift that 45-pound trophy, then come back to have a press conference with the media, and then there's a big banquet on Sunday, which is where they used to do the Heisman presentation years ago, when it was actually the Downtown Athletic Club's building, which doesn't.
They didn't bring finalists there. They just brought the winner
guy.
there.
Yeah, it wasn't until the early '80s that they started bringing finalists. Like when Charles Alexander was in the hunt in the late 1970s, he didn't get to go to New York. So it's a nice thing. They're feted and they're treated very nicely, and it's established starting in 21. They're going to bring 4 guys every year. It used to be 3, sometimes 5. Back in the 80s, one time they invited 8 and only 4 showed up. So that probably wasn't a good idea.
Do you remember what year that was?
I want to say in like 88 or 89.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know who.
Tim Brown won in 88. Oh, no, I take that back. He won in 87.
He won in 87.
Oh, we won't bore Wilson with the history lessons.
Andre Ware, I think. I think maybe Andre Ware.
Andre Ware won in 89.
Okay.
We were going to go down a rabbit hole. We better not do that.
But, it's a really, they treat them like, college football royalty. I mean, and this is this is not only one of the biggest nights in college football of the whole season. To me, it's the most famous individual award in American sports.
Of course.
I mean, you can say the Cy Young Award or something like that, but who really remembers who won the NFL MVP? 5, 8 years
listen,
ago.
I don't want to speak for
NFL
you guys.
fans, but I mean, doesn't have that
same ring. The Cy Young's the only thing to me that comes close.
I don't want to speak for you guys, but don't you feel like it's an honor to be able to vote for the Heisman Trophy? It's the Heisman Trophy.
It is an incredible honor. I mean, when Rab asked me, because he helps coordinate this, hope I'm not giving anything away, like on the Louisiana level, if I wanted to be a voter a couple years ago, like, it's one of the things that, like, in this job is the coolest things that we get to do.
Yep.
It's an honor. And I get some people. There's one voter who says, "I voted. Thank you for asking me to vote again." Well, of course, it's fine. But it's really something. It goes back to 1935. There's been a lot of tradition with it, and a lot of great winners. Some not so great, but it's a fantastic experience for all those guys, and for the winner. For the winner, if that's Jayden Daniels, it's a level of college football immortality that they just the rest of your life, wherever you go. If I may make a golf analogy, I like it to be the Masters champion. You're the Masters champion for. I think people probably say about Tiger Woods, Masters champion more than they say PGA champion or something like that.
Of course.
And whatever you do, whatever he does professionally, whatever Joe Burrow does professionally. I think people will think of him as Heisman Trophy winner Joe Burrow. First of all, you get that prefix to your name the rest of your life. That must be one of the most amazing things that Robert Griffin, I saw some the other day. He's a commentator now on ESPN, won for Baylor in 2011. He said you can't appreciate it as much at the time. The appreciation just grows, and I'm sure that will be the case for Jayden, who I expect would give a very humble speech on Saturday night.
I think he would too. Jayden is so calm, and he doesn't like come off ever as like overly cocky or anything like that. I think humble is a good word for it. He's like, I'll be fascinated to see kind of how he handles being on, because when he's on field, he lets his play do the talking. And going up there to give a speech, I'm sure he'll do fine, but I am fascinated to hear what he has to say if he gets put in that position. And to build off what you said, I was talking to Bunny Cannon, Billy Cannon's daughter, this week for a story that we got coming out in Saturday's paper. And she said, like, just what you're saying, it's not only like Billy Cannon, Heisman Trophy winner. For all of them, it's Heisman Trophy winner's daughter, Heisman Trophy winner's wife,
Right.
Heisman Trophy winner's son. Like, it is something that becomes a very distinct part of your family as well, not just for you, but anyone who you're related to and who you build your life around. And
these are some of the people who go down wherever they're from. And of course, college sports, a lot about it is where you're from. You identify with your hometown, your home state. And I think of someone like Billy Cannon, who played high school football here in Baton Rouge, and then was had his ups and downs, but ended up being revered. Or Niall Kinnick at Iowa, who was still
There's nobody more revered than Niall Kinnick in the state of Iowa.
And no one, and then and then some people just stand out, like John Cappelletti, of course, gave the emotional speech of all time when he won at Penn State in 1974 about his little brother Joey, who had, I believe, leukemia, and there wasn't a dry eye. And sometimes you think, I'll be interested to see how he reacts. Joe Burrow was overcome. He was really overcome.
That was the most emotional I think we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Joe
I was
Burrow.
actually going to ask you about that. I mean, I guess the answer is yes before I even asked the question. But, of course, the ceremony is 54.5 minutes of blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
I got to tell you, I was, of course, back here at headquarters, sort of, scrambling furiously, waiting for this thing to be finished in 2019. And things drag and drag. And then Joe Burrow gets up there and is moved to tears and, kind of brings down the house. It was a hell of a show-stopping speech. Were you I was surprised.
I was, yeah. I was a little bit. Yeah, it just, like, because we used to Joe being a little cocky and, that's his personality. And that's fine. But I thought he might say something a little more, he might make some remarks that were a little more, flippant or something like that. Not at all. He was just overwhelmed. You got to think back to all the people who helped you along the way and got you to that point. And it must be an amazing thing. And I hope for anyone who's a finalist, and that could just be Jayden, it might turn out to be differently than what we expect, that it's still an honor and appreciation to get that far, to be in that. I think that Final Four is a cool number. Hopefully they'll expand it to 12 in one day. Like the playoff. 4 is good for the Heisman Trophy. So we'll see. And so, someone asked me, do you think because Marvin Harrison's a finalist, do you think that negates Malik Neighbors' chances of winning the Biletnikoff? I don't necessarily think so. I think
Harrison's still going to win.
I think he's still going to win, but I don't think it means that it's over for Malik Neighbors. I think it's going to be quite close.
The other thing, maybe I'm the only one interested in this, but just something to part of the ceremony as well. This is kind of a chance for all these guys to actually dress up.
Yeah.
And what you don't usually do, you're usually playing football. And obviously, these days when you're going down like Victory Hill, like a lot of LSU's players wearing suits and stuff like that. But Jayden, anyway, all to say, Jayden takes his clothes pretty seriously.
Yeah, he does.
And
his $425 sunglasses.
Yeah, exactly. He likes to shop. And so I'll be interested to see what he's wearing, frankly, just because it's something that he put some thought into, that his mom put some thought into when he went to media days. They had sort of planned out this all black suit with white shirt buttoned up and these very specific shoes and stuff with these really big chunky laces. And I remember that specifically. And so I'll be interested to see what he comes out with, just because in 19 it was kind of fun. Jayden doesn't get to do this whole sort of parade that Joe Burrow did because ESPN's College Football Awards show, it's on Friday, which Jayden could win 3 awards there. He's a finalist for the Davey O'Brien, which goes to top quarterback, and then the Walter Camp and the Maxwell, which are both just the most, the best players overall. Burrow showed up in that purple seersucker
Sure did.
suit from, I think it was from Haspel's, but am I saying that right? Okay. Haspel, thank you. Sorry. And that he had made for him, and that was kind of a fun part of the weekend that a lot of people enjoyed seeing. So we'll see what Jayden does.
In terms of fashion at the Heisman ceremony, they were all chasing Lamar Jackson. I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but Lamar had the red suit with the black lapels, looked like $1 million. But we will wrap it up here just by asking the most important, the most pertinent question of this whole matter, which is we've all We've all seen the odds, obviously. We all sort of think we know what's going to happen, but we don't know for sure. As I said, it's not a landslide. It's not a runaway the same way it was in 19. It was a historic landslide in 19 with Joe Burrow, won by the biggest margin ever and everything like that. So we think we know what's going to happen, but we don't know for sure. So I'll just put it to you two gentlemen. Do you think Jayden Daniels brings home the Heisman from New York and brings it back home to LSU? Yes or no?
Yes, I certainly do. It was certainly up in the air going into the Pac-12 championship game, and obviously some people will be moved to vote for Michael Penix since his team is in the playoff, and he is the one player who has a chance to be the best player on the best team. Mm-hmm. And they're in the playoff, number 2 seed, and he beat Bo Nix head to head. But I think he had a lot of ground to catch up. And I think if, like I've been saying, if the Heisman voters are doing their homework and you see that Jayden is on pace to set a record for total offense, he's got more yards per game than Alabama does, than Michigan does. Two of the teams in the playoff. And all these categories where he's just tremendous. 3,000-yard passer and 1,000-yard rush. He's 26th in the country in rushing.
Yes.
Which is
not rushing for a quarterback. Rushing.
Yeah. Period. The top quarterback. I think he wins. Not like Joe Burrow landslide. I don't think that could be the case for anybody this year. But certainly, I think he's just. I was at the SEC championship game Saturday, and the only person that I came across who was not leaning Jayden's way was Dennis Dodd, who tweeted after the Pac-12 championship game, Michael Penix 1, Daniels 2, and Bo Nix 3. So. But a lot of people, I think, were going with him, and I think were moved by what he did all season, which was a tremendous season, and one for the books, and it deserves the Heisman Trophy.
I agree with Rab. We are obviously close to this, covering Jayden all the time and seeing it up close every Saturday this fall. But especially while watching the Pac-12 championship game, it just sort of confirmed in my mind that Jayden should win this. And so, yes, I think he will. And to firmly answer your question, he has done everything you need to do to win the award and then some. Even though he's on a 9-3 team, he's a big reason the team is even 9-3. And he's been statistically, he's phenomenal, but also just visually, we're just watching the game, taking out the stats from it. He has been fantastic. He takes over games.
Breathtaking.
That's a great word for it. And so I think that he is going to lift that trophy on Saturday night. I think it's going to be a little bit surreal, frankly, because I've sat with him in LSU's quarterback room multiple times, just chatting, interviews I've gotten to do with him. We've seen him over 2 years here now. I think it's going to be a little bit surreal to watch him, raise that and be really cemented in immortality in a way. He's going to be, I think, if saying that, this is if he wins, of course, that he is going to be, like we said, one of those people who forever has that associated with him, and one of 89 players in all of the hundreds of thousands who have played college football. Right. He will be, I think, at the end of Saturday night, the one of 89 to have ever won this thing.
And LSU can be one of 12 schools to have 3 or more Heisman winners. So it elevates. A win would elevate LSU's program as well, and have 2 and 4 years, as we've said, really helps them in going forward in terms of the quarterback position.
These two gentlemen here will be headed up to New York to see whether Jayden Daniels will take it home themselves. They will. You guys are going to have a little candlelight dinner or something on Friday night at Spark Steakhouse or something, or what?
We haven't gotten that far.
He's
I don't
the food
know.
Guy.
I need to still do my food research.
I'm the travel planner. Wilson's the food guy. So.
And I never steer us wrong.
No,
not like Michael Scott. I'm not going to get an authentic New York slice like he did at Sbarro. I'm not getting an authentic New York slice somewhere else.
4 years ago, some of you probably remember Brooks Cabino, who was our lead beat writer before Wilson. So it was Brooks and I who went to New York 4 years ago, and we couldn't get in anywhere. We ate pizza out of a window right off of Times Square. God. It was good though, but it was pizza and it was raining. It was like pizza raining out of a window. So we'll remember this. Yeah. Wilson probably steer us someplace a little better.
Just remember, every time you think that this job is glamorous, looking from the outside in, sometimes you're eating pizza through a window with the rain falling down on you in the middle of Manhattan.
Or you're hopping over the fence at out of a high school stadium.
We could do a whole podcast just on that. I think everybody's got at least 3 or 4 stories on that. Breaking a leg, trying to hop a fence somewhere at 11:15 p.m. with all the lights off. Anyway, the lights are going to be bright in New York, as they always are on Saturday, we will be here. Certainly, we're going to have some great coverage for you the rest of this week at theadvocate.com. I'm really excited for the package we're going to put together for you guys on Saturday, and then of course on Sunday. Should Jayden Daniels win? Well, we're probably going to we will be staring down the barrel of another championship poster of sorts, another front page advocate poster. Which these things, of course, they're iconic, as we say. So many of them over the years now, with all the championships LSU's won, the Heisman trophies LSU's won, and all those sorts of things. So, we'll be looking forward to bringing all that to you. We're here every Monday and Thursday with our podcast. We'll be live. Monday and Thursday we'll be live next week on all our social channels, specifically the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Please subscribe there. Please subscribe to The Advocate. You go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And get a hold of our newsletter to stay up to date with everything. Not just Jayden Daniels' pursuit of the Heisman, but also LSU's got bowl practice coming up, spring practice coming up, women's basketball, men's basketball, baseball. Stay up to date with that. Get the LSU newsletter delivered straight to your inbox. You go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are brought to you every Monday and Thursday, of course, by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, you go to Champion Wealth Strategies and plan like a champion today. We will be here. We will be live on Saturday, of course, at theadvocate.com, checking everything out. And these two gentlemen will also provide some video updates while we're there.
That's what I was going to mention.
Yeah, so look, they're multimedia stars and beautiful ones at that. So they're ready for their close up. For Scott Rabalais, for Wilson Alexander, and for Amelia Cotton behind the glass, I'm Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.